I don't know if you're in this boat, but in our family, we do a lot of recalibrating. It's a time for us to hit pause and to change some habits that maybe we've adopted as a family to make things work the way that we want them to. We recalibrate often at the beginning of the year. And today in the Celebrate Kids podcast, in our daily segment, Face in the Dark, we're going to look at a school that recently recalibrated. They hit pause on hoodies and cell phones in their school, banning them, really. Why did they do this? And what does it say about us when we just all of a sudden kind of come back and kind of slap an issue and say it's not welcome here anymore? Is banning really a good practice for us to have for teens? It can be a dark place. So today we're going to look to Dr. Kathy to give us some insight on this. So here's Dr. Kathy Cook.
Don't be afraid of the dark. Be careful with stars. Not every light is gonna guide you, baby. Not every light is gonna guide you.
So Dr. Kathy, students that are returning back to class in Flint, Michigan are finding a new policy in their hallways. Their cell phones and their hoodies are banned from school, largely in the name of safety. Superintendent Kevin Jones, ahead of the Flint School Board's vote on December 13th when they settled this matter, said, when we think about our scores, when we think about all the things that are surrounding the hurt and the pain that our scholars are feeling, cell phones are a big deal. He goes on to say, quote, it's a part of the bullying. It's a big part of the reason why our scholars are not on task in class, end quote. Guidance recommending this ban that the Flint, Michigan School Board enacted took effect in England in October of last year, after the establishment of kind of similar policies that happened in recent years in Finland and France. And a rule in the Netherlands is set to take place later on this month. So, Dr. Kathy, in a digital world where kids are being asked to really be online, much of their schedule and life revolves around things that are in the cloud. Is banning really a great practice? Or should we be teaching kids how to use things like cell phones kind of in school in an ethical kind of way in these different places where they're learning? What are your thoughts here to this ban?
I would say yes and yes. I do think that there are times when a ban is okay. I totally agree that cell phones in schools and in churches are destroying relationships. They're changing where the kids are focusing. And it's interesting. We've talked in other episodes about how America needs to stay competitive and we want to stay at the top so that we can make sure that we're controlling a lot and we're leading in a lot of ways. So here we have other countries already saying the whole country, we're banning it in schools. And here we are. That's an interesting thing for us to think about. So a ban may be, in fact, really appropriate. I also think whether we ban or not in certain circumstances, we must be teaching our young people how to use them well, why to turn them off, why to put them on silent or airplane mode, why to hide them, why you can live life without them, how you can go out to a park and not take 1,000 pictures. We need to be teaching those kinds of things.
What do you think it is about really cell phones that has such a natural pull to really negatively impact young people? I mean, when I think of cell phones, I don't think of them being a benefit to my kids. I think of them being something negative that my kids have to almost like live with. Why is that? Why do we look at them in such a negative light? Or why do they almost pull out that negative kind of perspective inside of our young kids?
Yeah, I like the way you worded that. I think we see them as negative because we've seen them affect our kids negatively. You know how your son was before he was granted the use of a cell phone, and you know what's happened the longer that he's had it. He may not be aware of that, either because he's not self-aware or he doesn't want to see it because he doesn't want to give up the phone, which is a status symbol. So for a lot of our kids, it's a status symbol. It is convenient. It is efficient. It's all the things that do make life easier for us. Let's admit that. But it also causes us to be self-centered, to feel entitled that we can have whatever we want when we want it now. We control. Like there's nothing on my phone that I don't want on my phone. I mean, so, right, we get this perfect little world that we think is where we are allowed to live. It makes things easy. Nothing wrong with easy, except that when children are granted device use when they're young and their brain is not finished yet, their brain is wired to expect things to be easy. I sometimes use the example of patience. Those of us that have adapted to technology because we didn't have it in our developmental years will gravitate toward patience. Or I like to say that patience will always be our default. Impatience, not so much. We don't like it. It doesn't feel safe here for us. It's not how we were raised. Young children today are gravitating toward impatience. It feels normal to them because everything is easy, quick about them, fast, automatic, and available and all those things. And so I tell them, For the Christian, I say God's not going to rewrite the Bible for your generation, nor should he. And I've had some teenagers clap when I say that because they want to know, Dr. Kathy, you're right. This is a sin. I need to get it right. Just because impatience is easy doesn't make it right. And so our kids are in a real battle. They have something that is changing their brain structure. The brain isn't finished until you're 23, 24, 25 years old. So if you use devices that allow everything to be about you and, easy and automatic, then that's how you think the world works. And now when your mom makes you slow sweep out the garage, when your teacher makes you write a paper in longhand so she knows that you haven't copy and pasted necessarily from a device, et cetera, you complain up a storm. It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it is really hard. I think it's hard also for those that watch this, right? Like these educators here at this school, the school board members that signed on to be a part of this group, this governance body that is really engaged in caring for the kids. They're raising their hands and saying, this is a problem. And I think it's kind of interesting, in our house, we have kind of policies or practices, or I wouldn't even maybe call them policies or practices. They're habits, really. Let's just call them what they are. We have habits of technology in our house. And I think for some families, they kind of look at it and they'll make the hard decision. They'll pull it away, or they'll even restrict it from the front end, right? They'll get a phone that doesn't do all of the things because they want to teach their kids how to process and use things differently and what have you. But to have these educators and these kind of people in public institutions really say this is important, we're going to set up these parameters, is interesting. They're stepping into kind of that continuing to shape kind of guidance. What would be kind of appropriate policies or practices for families, do you think, to make it so that almost, I would say, these institutions don't have to deal with this? I mean, can you imagine if this school board had a meeting that talked about enhancing their curriculum, that rather than how to keep some things away from the kids to keep them distracted from the curriculum? If we joined together as families to benefit our kids in a better way, it could really make these institutions actually hum along in a stronger kind of platform. They could do the things that they signed on to do, not take hoodies or cell phones away from kids. What practices should families have to kind of help these institutions out? What do you think there?
Yeah, I appreciate this question again. And we can, as far as I'm concerned, we could talk about this every week, Wayne, because I know it is a real need that our parents have. So I'm really glad we're talking about it. I think we need to talk to our kids about need versus want. We talk about this a lot. Do you need a phone or want a phone? Do you need 10 more minutes on the game or want them? Do you need a stronger cell signal or do you want one? Do you need another cookie or do you want one? We can start when they're little, way before they are introduced to technology, to teach the difference between want and need. And we teach them family values. In our family, we value togetherness. We value unity. We value one-on-one conversations with each of you. And because of that, we limit our use of phones. So what are your values? And if you don't know, sit down, slow down. And if you're a believer, ask the Lord to show you, why are you a family? And what is it that you're going to be doing differently because of that? Certainly, we teach them how to use the phones and why we have the parameters on our own devices that we have. And we teach them, who are you? Who are you? Because when kids know who they are, they'll make their own wise decisions. If they've discovered through educators and church members and pastors and parents that they're creative or they're outgoing or they're passionate, then they're going to use devices differently to either support those values or they'll put them aside because they realize that the phone gets in the way of compassion or the phone gets in the way of being other-centered. And they're going to figure that out on their own, which I think would be amazing. Devices only in public places. Another thing I think we teach at home, devices are only used in public places. So you do your homework in the den where mom can stop by at any moment and look over your shoulder. We know of way too many kids who discover filth when they're in the privacy of their own room. They didn't mean to discover it. They found it. And now they're alone and they don't know what to do with it. If they find it in a public setting, they're much more likely to react in a way and go, Mom, come look at this. And you instantly have a conversation, which is really rich. And then, again, I would say, and this is hard, we have to limit the use. We do for ourselves and for our children. Younger kids because of brain and heart's development, us because we matter more. We were created for people. We were created for interaction. We were created to learn. We were created to be. And there are good uses of technology. We're using it to produce the podcast. And there are uses of technology that can really interfere with who we are becoming. And that's what I would want. That's what I would want moms and dads to be really alert to.
You know, as Dr. Kathy was talking today, it made me think of a passage that comes out of Titus chapter 2, and I'm going to begin reading it, verse 1. You, however, must teach what is appropriate to sound doctrine. Teach the older men to be temperate, worthy of respect, self-controlled, and sound in faith, in love, and in endurance. There's so many times in Scripture that I just look at what Paul tells the early church to do. The early pastors, the people leading congregations. It's time to recalibrate. It's like Paul says that many times inside of his letters. And I think what Dr. Kathy talked about today is it's time for us to recalibrate for ourselves, to be self-controlled, and also to recalibrate for our families. Is what's happening now what we want to happen? If it's not, let's recalibrate. Let's hit pause. Let's ban some things. Let's free some things. Let's enjoy and celebrate some things. Let's give things the right due. I think doing that can be a bright light for our kids as they're facing dark times, and maybe even for ourselves as we're facing dark times. Let's recalibrate. Let's make it a habit and a practice inside of our faith walk and inside of our family walk. You know, I want to thank you for listening to the Celebrate Kids podcast in this, our daily segment, Face in the Dark. There's some really exciting things that are happening right now here at Celebrate Kids, and we're so excited that you're joining us in this podcast and on this journey as we work to encourage families, parents, teachers, those working with kids to follow Christ's example to celebrate kids. On behalf of Dr. Kathy Cook and the rest of us here at the Celebrate Kids team, thanks for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you here again tomorrow.